Fable 33rd. That too.
All right. So after 10 minutes of technical fun stuff, we finally get to begin. Well, howdy everybody. I'm John Alexander, L2 from here. I have worked an event with all but I think 2 of you at this point, which is kind of fantastic at this point, and shared a room with nearly that many. So this is the introduction to competitive REL. What I'll be focusing on today largely is gameplay errors and how those are translated into penalties in competitive REL and how that differs from regular REL. So this will serve largely as either a refresher to those of you who are very comfortable with competitive REL, or a jumpstart for those of you who would like to get into it, doing events like PPTQs and SCG Opens, stuff of that. So competitive REL is the second of 3 different enforcement levels in Magic. There being regular, competitive, and professional. Professional, I'm not going to talk about today. If that comes up for you, I think you'll be well prepared from other sources. Professional is largely just on day 2's GPs or the Pro Tour, things of very high stakes and very high scrutiny. Competitive REL is largely defined by the IPG, the Infraction Procedure Guide. So it outlines the infraction penalties, fixes, and philosophies. One small little package. It is not an exciting read. However, it is incredibly important for us, for fairness and smooth running of competitive events. So the jar, of course, everyone here, I imagine, is well acquainted with. That, of course, is judging a regular REL document, and that is used largely for F&M level events or side events at big events like GPs. So the jar has a completely different goal than well, relatively similar, but very different in its core philosophy, which the goal is, of course, to make a fun and welcoming environment for people of all experience. From the PPTQ grinder to the brand new player who's just picking up cards for the first time. That's the goal. The IPG, however, assumes that everyone there for the tournament already knows how to play, and that consistent avoidable mistakes are enough to create a fair environment. Deviations are incredibly rare. One of the few situations I've heard of where a deviation occurred, as in someone had to replace some cards, was because it was raining on their play space, and they needed to replace some cards. In those cases, of course, it would fall into perhaps a decklist error, sorry, say that again, deck problem. But given that the problem is with the rain coming from the sky, we do our best to help fix those extreme situations. So the best way to have the IPG on hand is with either MTG Familiar, which is an app for Android, or for Apple users, MTG Guide, which I believe is like a $10 per visit. Not a big deal, and it will be worth its weight in gold during your events. So at competitive REL, we have a lot more than just hugs and DQs. Our goal, of course, we add warnings, game losses, and match losses all for the sake of fairness. And all of these are recorded and tracked through Word, of course. So 3 warnings for the same gameplay error lead to a game loss, and 2 for a tournament error then lead to a game loss. And in general, in a larger event, game losses would go through a head judge or team lead. All right, so we're going to start off with mistrigger. A mistrigger is, of course, a triggered ability. Of course, either when, whenever, or at. If you see that on a card, it's most likely a trigger. And the fix in the jar, can someone tell me what that fix is?
Put it on the stack.
In general, put it on the stack if it's not horribly disruptive.
Yeah.
Competitive fix is if it has been too long, often more than one turn cycle, we're not going to do anything about it. If the duration is over, It's not something that we're going to fix. In general, that's something like Chalice of the Void or cards similar to that create an effect that, if put on the stack now, will do absolutely nothing. Otherwise, ask the opponent if they would like to put it on the stack. If yes, go ahead and put it on the stack right now. If not, do not. There are warnings for detrimental triggers that are missed. Of course, the warning for the person who controls the detrimental trigger. So what do you guys think about the card Howling Mine, of course? How would that be officiated? So if I missed the draw trigger on my turn, what would be the fix and what would be the penalty? Oh, at this point, I'll start pointing people out.
Is it
in the back.
untapped?
Yes, of course, it is untapped. Thank you very much.
Where are we at in the turn?
This
Just
would be the
immediately
first
after?
main phase, let's say.
What's this?
First main phase.
First main phase, okay. What's the level of the event?
Competitive.
Competitive, okay. Then I would assume we're going to allow the opponent to make the decision if he goes on the stack.
Gotcha. Would that be considered a beneficial or detrimental trigger?
We would assume that it's in your deck for that reason to draw extra cards, so it's probably beneficial.
Gotcha. What if the exact same situation happened, except it was my opponent's turn? I still own the Howling Mine, but it is now their turn, and the trigger is causing them to draw a card. Would it be officiated differently?
Probably not, since I'm the control of the effect.
Indeed. So in that case, the Howling Mine is one of the very strange situations. You very rarely see a trigger be beneficial and detrimental in different areas, but in that case, yeah, that would be a warning for missing it on your opponent's turn. All right. So another thing to keep in mind is cards like Pious Malcolm, if you guys know that one, or cards of itself. Look out for those specific triggers. They're delayed zone change triggers and are officiated differently. Scarab God is an excellent example as well. In that case, with delayed zone change triggers, if they are missed and the player remembers them, at that point we ask the opponent if they would like it to be put on the stack at this very moment or at the beginning of the next step or phase. The reason we do so is because they are incredibly easy to miss. And if they are missed, they often cause very severe downsides for the person using the card. This sort of policy came into play specifically for cards like the original Obsidot, or the one from RTR as well. Because if you miss that trigger and we officiate it as normal, you would lose that card forever. 5 mana, big creature, gone. But that's why it is officiated differently. All right, looking at extra cards. A player sees a card that he or she was not entitled to see, but I suppose that should be they now. The fix is to shuffle the revealed cards into the randomized portion of the library and continue, and a warning for the offending player.
And there's your audible warning for it.
Sorry?
There's your audible warning for it.
We do have quite the audible warning. This will occur if the player either sees extra cards from their opponent's deck or their own. The common example, of course, is that I'm shuffling my opponent's deck, and I drop a card onto the table. I see it. I go, oops, judge. Another thing to keep in mind is that this, as well as hidden card error, are very close in certain scenarios, and the big dividing factor between the two is whether it is a dexterity error or not. In almost all cases, a mistrigger is either a dexterity error or like a card sticking to another that leads to a card being seen unintentionally. And if you ever have a question about those two penalties, that is the dividing line that you need to look for. And hidden card error, relatively new infraction, within the last few years, and it is at least within the last, there was a big period for like about, I would say even a year and a half, that every single time the IPG came out, there was a new change to hidden card error. Nowadays, it seems like they've kept it pretty standard, but it has been a very useful tool for us. So a player commits an error in the game that cannot be corrected by publicly available information, does so without his or her opponent's permission. So those examples are good. Draw 3 cards for divination, grabs 4 cards for a sensei's top, though people don't do that very much anymore. Or they have more cards in their hand than they should. That being, you get to your turn and like, I don't know why I have 8 cards in hand. I really shouldn't. we should do something about this. Something to keep in mind is that you can actually use publicly or previously known information to fix a problem like this. As in, if an opponent draws a card that they shouldn't have and has one card in hand, then we can actually use that information to help with the fix. Or if the opponent has previously thought-seized their opponent, we can use that information to say, well, we knew all these cards beforehand. This is the card that is the problem. All right. So the way we fix it is generally with the thought-seize fix. The set that contains the error is revealed to the opponent. They choose cards equal to the error, and those are either shuffled away or returned to where they belong. Also, if in the case that this was due to a tutor effect, I believe we repeat that effect rather than just rather than leaving it as is. So in the case of Dark Confidant, things get a little muddled. So I'll give you guys a scenario right now. I'm playing with the Dark Confidant, and I note Dark Confidant trigger, take the card, put it in my hand, and then at that moment I call Judge. I'm like, I should have revealed that. So given the Thoughtseize fix, the general philosophy of how to use that, what do you guys think the fix would be?
I think the fix for that is you reveal a card from their hand and then put it on top of that, and then that's the opponent head and what the trigger is going to say.
So that's very close. In this case, given the specific scenario I had where the player has noted that they've remembered their trigger, but then resolved it incorrectly, it'd be hidden card error, and that's how we would officiate it. And the way we would do it is by effectively Thoughtseizing a card, but having them reveal their hand and choose a card that was drawn for the Thoughtseize, or drawn for the Bob. At that point, I really hope you're not running Emrakul in your Bob deck, though you shouldn't be anyways. And that keeps consistent with cards of similar infractions, where you take a card from a hidden area, put it into another hidden area, and you use the Thoughtseize fix to effectively back up the mistake.
I have a question real quick.
Yeah, of course.
So if the opponent, when he calls the judge over, the opponent says, well, wait a minute, we should be able to fix this because I Thoughtseized him previously, and I've written down all the other cards in his hand, and I know that there's only one outstanding card.
Yeah, at that point, we're able to use that information, thankfully, and determine which card it was for sure, and then we just have that card get revealed and effectively resolve the trigger as normal. Of course, the player who performs or has the hidden card error, they do get a warning for this mistake. All right. So mulligan procedure error, there's not much to it. A player makes a general mistake during mulligans. The most common one is mulliganing from 7 to 7. Very rarely do people not draw enough cards and then keep, but I've seen that happen. That does not fall under this. At that point, oh, go ahead.
So, let's say we're starting the game out, and I put 7 cards face down, and I'm mulliganing to 6. I pick up 6 of them and realize, wait, I have an extra card here. Is that mulligan procedure error?
That is an excellent question, and I should have that example on the slide.
Oh.
No, as in I should have put it on this slide.
Should be on,
No, thank you very much. That's a very common mistake that players make. If the cards have not been seen, they have not been drawn. At that point, you can just say that's a random card. You put it back on your deck. I'm always very happy to get that fix. My favorite fix is no penalty. So strangely, with this particular penalty, there are 2 separate fixes, and it is up to the opponent to decide which fix they're going to be. Say that again. It's up to the player who made the error. My apologies. Which fix they would like to do, and with full information of the cards that they have for their hand. Either they do the Thoughtseize fix that we saw earlier for hidden card error, or we force mulligan them down to 1 further than where they were supposed to be. So if they mulligan from 7 to 7, they get the choice of either mulliganing to 5 or Thoughtseizing away 1 card.
Just a note, they can still choose to mulligan again after the Thoughtseize.
Yes, yes. Otherwise, they go on with the mulligans afterwards. All right. So, GRBs, this is a catch-all for basically everything else that happens that doesn't fall into any of these previous known errors, like, failing to, I don't know, doomblading my opponent's card, they put it back in their hand, you know, stuff like that. Oh, go ahead.
Bolting a box.
Bolting a bogle. Yep,
Trying to target something with that card.
absolutely. So there are three partial fixes. So if the player made an illegal choice for a card, like Pithing Needle, they now make the choice. Same with cards like, more commonly seen, Captive Souls or the Territory from Unclaimed Territory. Gosh, that's what I should have expected. If a player has forgotten to draw, discard, or otherwise move cards from to or from their hand, they do that, like, let's say, not discarding enough cards to a Mind Rot or similar effect. If an object is in an incorrect zone, is known to all players, and can be moved with minimal disruption, then move it. So similar to a card that was, you know, Path of Exiled and put into the graveyard. If we can just put it into exile, it's a very easy fix. It's something that we should do. Otherwise, you have the option to back up or leave it as is. So I have an excellent example for this one. I was judging, well, what was it? Eternal Masters was being drafted, and I came to a table, and they say, well, my opponent's Argothian Elder, Argothian Enchantress, has an Elephant Guide on it. I asked, well, when did this happen? It happened, well, like 3 turns ago. I go, okay. So we take a look at the partial fixes. Well, they made an illegal choice. Well, that's not the sort of illegal choice we're talking about. The player's forgotten to draw, discard, none of those. If an object is in an incorrect zone, don't all players, can be moved. Not that either. So I had the option to back up or leave it as is. The things to keep in mind with backups mostly are time. Time and fetches, honestly. The best goal, or the goal of a backup, is to make it so that the game state would end up as it should have been. But if we are 3 turns past, the players have now made an incredible amount of decisions based on the fact that there's an Enchantress with an Elephant Guide on it. And we can't exactly back up through 3 turns worth of actions, because I'm sure they don't remember exactly what happened either, or in what order. So in that case, what do you guys think I did? Because I was basically given one choice: either put that Elephant Guide in the graveyard, or leave the things as they are.
I would assume you put it in the graveyard.
I did not, because at that point it was on that creature legally. There's nothing stopping Argothian Enchantress from having an enchantment on it, except for the fact that it can't be targeted by the card.
Right.
And at that, yeah, and at that point, I couldn't back up because it had been too long. So I told the players, play on.
I had a scenario like that at the Road pre-release where I had a Tel'Jalad Archer equipped with a Viridian Longbow and forgot about the, hey, he's pro artifact.
Yep.
And had a judge come over and during a key combat moment said, why is this on there? And I went, oh yeah, he's pro artifact. And we had it fall off immediately, and it influenced the combat.
So that brings up another point. If you can apply state-based actions to make it not there, then yeah, do that.
Indeed. So
that's not a listed partial fix, but should be obvious.
Yeah. So in that case, that one's actually quite interesting, because what you're doing is not even applying a fix. What you're doing is, as Min said, applying state-based actions so that it falls off normally, which is different than the creature having Shroud, because though it can be attached, it often isn't.
Sure.
In that case, they've got to go away. They're not supposed to be friends.
Absolutely.
All right. Next slide, please. All right. So failure to maintain game state often goes hand in hand with GRD. So if an opponent of a player who has come into GRD does not point it out quickly, often they are assessed a failure to maintain game state. This does not come with a penalty. Well, sorry, I'll rephrase that. It does come with a penalty. That penalty is warning, but the warnings are never upgraded to game losses. The biggest reason that we do this is because of for tracking purposes. Situations like this, where someone makes an illegal action and their opponent doesn't say anything, is a situation for opportunistic cheating. Allowing your opponent to make an illegal choice, which is good for you, and allowing the game to play on as though you're missing it. Also, something to keep in mind when you come to a table is that if someone has missed something like very obvious, maybe it's worth spending some time investigating to see if something inappropriate is happening. So something to keep in mind here that is different for the current standard and draft format is sagas. Sagas have a really strange rule, which is that they have added a new turn-based action, which is where their counter goes on them. If an opponent does not remind you of that, well, that is a GRV for both people, because one person did not put the thing on there, and their opponent allowed them to take an illegal action. It is officiated differently just because of how it is worded in the rules. Though, of course, if someone manages to put on puts a Lord counter on their saga and not trigger it, I've never seen it, but that can happen, and it's a mistrigger.
It's a red column, but that's
I'm just going to list the tournament errors here. Dalton will be going over them very shortly, so I'm not going to go too in depth. But they are tardiness, of course, generally results in game loss. Outside assistance, this is if someone either gives or solicits information during deck build or gameplay. Slow play, of course, someone's taking their turn at an unreasonable rate. Deck and decklist problem, these are related to decks not matching deck lists or decks missing cards. Those end up, decklist problems often end up in, almost always end up in game losses. Deck problems, if found during a deck check, also almost always end up in game losses. The warnings come up if the players are able to find the mistake first and call us. Limited procedure violation, don't worry about it. That's specifically for drafts that happen at the PBTQ level or higher. When that comes up, it's something pretty easily gone over. Communication policy violation. Dalton will be going over that a lot because that has gotten changed significantly within the last, or at the beginning of Dominaria, I believe. Mark cards, of course, if someone has marked cards or sleeves, those often need to be fixed, and often, if there is a pattern, there's just game loss. I'll be going over shortly. And insufficient shuffling, pretty simple. Didn't shuffle enough. Dalton will get to that for you. All right, so I have a couple of short scenarios here, and I will need assistance in, well, I'll need to move that and use this small area. I will need a volunteer to, that's what I was thinking. How would that look on the camera? Will people be able to see it?
I mean, we can check it out.
Yes, I will need one volunteer to go to the far end of the room for a short while, and one volunteer to sit across from me and play out the scenario. There we go. So I would like someone who is less well versed in competitive REL to go shortly away and return. I will either take volunteers or point out people I don't know very well.
Bye, Brandon.
He's totally gonna watch through the wall or through the window. So I would
my situation will be I fertilized my opponent. My opponent says I don't have any basics left.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured.
And then passes back.
Oh well.
And just doesn't drop it. All right. Judge.
He's outside.
Oh, I'll go grab him.
Yeah, you got him. You got
Thank
him.
you.
Use your judge voice. So pretty.
Well, it did work.
So he's called John, so you know.
All right, Judge. So I used my fertilid on my opponent last turn, and I think I stopped and was dead, but they untapped. But they just said I don't have any basics in my deck, and they didn't do anything.
So let's see what this is. So move one more down on the fertilid. Target player searches his library for a basic player card, which I got from tapped and shows the library.
So what do we do?
Okay, so you said your opponent doesn't have any basics.
I don't have any basics.
Okay. At that point, they may search the library. If they don't have any bases, then they are allowed to say they didn't find anything, and they may shuffle their library.
Oh, so it's a me.
Oh. So, at this point, and they don't have any bases in their deck.
I know.
For an extra search, it's not like basics.
So,
So I'll just stop right here and explain the situation to the camera. So in this situation, the big rub here is that Fertilid has an ability that causes my opponent to shuffle, and they don't have an option. Even if they don't have any cards in their library and they're guaranteed, they know they're guaranteed not to find them, they're still required to shuffle. In this case, I would give the penalty of insufficient shuffling and have them shuffle their library. As strange as it sounds, even though it doesn't change anything, they are required to. Anyway, thank you very much.
Let's give a hand to Brandon.
Yeah. All right. So, one more volunteer, if you don't mind.
Brandon, pick somebody.
why me?
Pick somebody.
Yeah. Spread the sickness.
Spread the plague.
James. I don't think he.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Should I walk away?
Yes. Just far enough that you can't hear me talking to him.
He's the man with no name. His horse.
So, you use that. I use this. I have these guys. Well, you hold it.
Judge.
Okay.
Boy.
Sorry about
So I went to cast this.
Okay.
And then he played Unwind on that, and then did not untap one of my lands.
So I'm not. Can I refer rules? Can I look up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
So, out of scenario, you are required to untap 3 lands.
Yeah. Okay, so the new Teferi has a similar ruling where so the lands have to be tapped because they're not targeting them. So you would have to. Has this resolved yet?
Yes.
Okay, so then this.
Yeah, I untap my 2 lands.
Okay, so you have to untap a 3rd land still. So we're not very much farther than this, so you have to untap a 3rd land at this point. And you don't have a 3rd one to untap, so you can untap one of those. Okay, proceed.
What's the penalty?
Well, we haven't moved very far. I don't think it'd be a game rules violation. It might be a failure to upkeep the board state, but we haven't moved very far, so I'm not sure if I would apply one.
Well, so in this case, he called it very quickly and caught me on it. So in this case, I don't think I would give Doge a maintain Gamestate.
Okay.
However, this certainly would be a game rules violation. It doesn't fall into either any of the other fixes that we've seen. So at that point, we just put it into the all others catch-all GRP situation, and either back up or don't at all. Which in this case, we would just back up to the resolution of Unwind.
Okay.
And untap 1 more land. All right.
The only thing I want to point out is this is up to.
Oh, this one says up to. Dang.
That's why it's temporary. I guess I'm up to.
It
Dang
says, it says up to.
I wish I had Teferi. My apologies.
It's okay.
My apologies. Next time I'll get a Sharpie.
So for this, there's actually no penalty,
In this case, there's no penalty.
and my land should be tapped.
Indeed. Yeah.
Well, it's legal for you.
Yeah. You know, we all make mistakes.
Left jump.
Card reading violation.
Yeah.
Reserve.
Failure to read.
You get a presenter error warning.
All right. So if you would like to spread the sickness to someone else, we will have one final scenario before we move on.
Failure to read card T2.
You're not getting your extra foils on.
You know, I would play it. Alright, so this would be on my side, these both would be on my side, and this would be on yours. Actually,
Am I casting this?
you have cast. Okay. And this is now on.
Okay.
So this will be, no.
Okay. I'm just gonna cast it.
Yeah. So it'll be like this, and then.
Where you want
Alright. Judge!
Those questions, did you read your cards?
We picked one with less
Rarely.
text. Please raise your hand.
It's a basic.
Blair, I can't find you. Your hands are not up anymore.
Oh.
Blair.
It's the best part. They make eye contact and they're like, oh, he's coming. And then you lose track of where they are.
So, on my opponent's last turn, they cast this sleep paralysis starting my fire elemental. It's now my next main phase, and I forgot that I had this in play. And this being a lunar force, which says when an opponent casts a spell, sacrifice lunar force and counter that spell. What do we do?
It's been pretty good.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
It's a trigger. Since your turn.
Yes.
Yep, and I played that on my last one.
It's not your turn.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, how not good?
Well, as in, looks like that's probably the one you're gonna live in, and we probably catch the next spell, so that's pretty good.
Cool. If I remember. All right, thank you, Judge. Yeah, thank you. So I brought this up specifically because, well, I found this in my random card collection and realized that it was a lot cheaper than a Chalice of the Void. So this isn't something that comes up often until we get to the point where we're playing Modern or Legacy. But in that case, it happens incredibly often with Chalice of the Void. So this card says, whenever an opponent casts a spell, sacrifice Lunar Force and counter that spell. Similar to Chalice in the way that Chalice says, when an opponent, when a spell is cast, if it has CMC equal to the amount of counters on Chalice of the Void, counter that spell. So that of course is a trigger, and it's quite common that people will forget about it, and things will resolve through it. And given our trigger policy, there is no fix. Things just go on as normal. However, it is something to keep in mind that if the player does not counter their own spell, that would be a warning and also a lengthy investigation. All right. So thank you very much, Stephen. We'll get towards the end of this. Also, thank you very much, Scott. Thank you for the help. All right. I appreciate your patience, even with someone who doesn't read the cards. I tried really hard. I was like, this isn't Teferi, but it's the same thing.
Oh, wait. They added may or up to on almost all tap and tap effects because of that.
Yeah, Teferi is weird because it was the first time that it didn't.
They did add may or up to.
Yeah.
Usually add may or up to because the twiddle rule still applies, although they added may to twiddle.
Yeah, that's why they added made it twin.
All right, so now I'm going to move on to the basics of working a multi-judge event. If you guys have not done larger events before, things are a lot more specialized. You're not, selling soda as well as running the register, as well as running wire and picking up trash. You're still doing the trash thing, guaranteed. But other roles are more specialized. Often, there's generally a paper team tasked with getting slips passed out and pairings put up. Sometimes those two roles are also split up. End of round, cast with sweeping for slips. Man, that's hard to say. Sleeping for slips. And reminding other judges to do the same. And also sending judges to matches with time extensions. This, of course, to speed up the end of round procedure because, of course, one, sometimes people don't know that it's the end of the round, and two, it does take a significant amount of time for table 350 to get their match slip all the way from the other end of the hall to the table. The scorekeeper enters results players into work and starts the event and flips it with the rounds. Be very nice to your scorekeeper, please. It's one of the best things you can do. I've never score kept. I've just learned how important it is. So on the floor, that's in general where you'll be spending most of your time. If you're on the paper team or end of round or deck text team, in general, if you're not doing that job, you'll be on the floor taking calls, picking up trash, watching Magic, having a good old time. Deck checks. Checks to make sure that the deck lists remain the same throughout the day, that people aren't losing their cards, stuff like that. Of course, at lower level events, you don't even do deck checks, but it's very important in competitive REL tournaments to do that. Would anyone like to give me an answer why? And I will say beforehand that this is a trick question.
Pre-sideboarding and cheating is a thing.
That is a very important reason why.
Show of force.
And she has it. So the most important reason why we do deck checks is to make sure that people know that they could be deck checked. Common policy for or where you want to hit in most events is at least 10% of decks. Some events won't get there, but those are in extreme situations. But that means that there are up to 90% of players will not get deck checked. But as long as they are seeing judges in halls picking up random decks, especially grabbing mid-round deck checks, it's very they see that perhaps it's not the smartest idea to cheat. So even though we don't have enough people to count every list and check every deck, we can get a lot of the effectiveness through having people on the floor taking decks. So we'll go through the penalties on these. So there are deck problems. The contents of the sideboard don't match the deck list, and the deck list represents what the player intended to play. This is the first thing I want to say for this is that it is often, in fact, most times, upgraded to a game loss, as most of the times that you find these problems are during a deck check. Though the IPG does mention that that is a warning upgraded to a game loss, those are the situations where the players call you over, rather than you picking up the deck. They did have a problem with that when they first updated this rule and separated deck and deck list problem, and it confused people based on the way that they laid out the penalty. It was a little confusing. The fixes are only for warning situations because, of course, if you have given someone a game loss, they are not playing their game anymore, and we won't do much about that. But it does come into play with some of the situations. So remove incorrect cards or return missing cards. This in the case that something hits the floor, stuff like that, and they realize that they're missing the card in their deck midway through the match. So if it is the second game and missing cards are in the sideboard, choose randomly sideboard cards to add in. Because at this point, they have missing cards from their deck, but we don't necessarily know what sideboard cards, we can't determine what cards they put in. So at that point, we have to just do it in the best way we can, which is randomly. So if these are in the opening hand, and we fix a problem like this, as in they start their first game, they draw their opening hand, and they say, "Oh, Judge, I have a pre-sideboard card in my deck." We say, "Okay, we'll fix this problem," and then you're forced to mulligan down. Decklist problem. Decklist, the cards the decklist contains is illegal, or doesn't match what the player intended to play, or needs to be modified. So this is either a game loss or can be reversed, meaning that there would be no penalty. This is in the case where a player says, "Hey, my deck had 3 Teferi in it, and it only has 2 in it right now, and I'm going to go to that vendor over there and buy one, and I'll be right back." And at that point, as soon as they've got that other one in their deck, there's no longer a problem anymore. So I'm going to bring up a particular phrase here, obvious and unambiguous. This refers to someone writing something down on their deck list that is not correct, but is close enough to a single card that it could be assumed that that card is the correct one. Often this comes down to either misspellings or miswordings of particular cards. What is a fantastic example?
Thanks. The reward to variant standard.
Yeah, that falls under the second one, but yeah, so yeah, something like Binks. I would like to pose a situation to you guys. Let's say you have someone who is on Green Red Tron. You look through their list, and they have one card seemingly incorrect. The card is Oblivion Ring, and if you guys are know Modern at all, that card is white and not often played in Green Red Tron. Do you guys believe that is obvious and unambiguous?
Is there a way their deck could theoretically generate mana to cast it?
Yes, they have their stars and spheres.
I don't know.
You don't know?
I mean, they have a means to be able to cast it.
It is legal in the format, and I would probably. I think it's difficult to just assume what it is based on not everybody plays a stock list from the internet, and they may play something that looks kind of out of kilter because it might throw their opponent off. We can't make assumptions, I don't think, based on what it should be or what we would feel like is an optimal card to play in its place.
Fair. You were saying?
Do they have O-Stone on their list already?
No, they have Oblivion Ring.
Alright.
That is the card that they have, or say they have.
When did we catch this?
We got this during the deck check.
Okay. I'm gonna follow up with. Did they have Oblivion Ring in the deck?
They have Oblivion Stone.
Okay. This is the part where I would follow up with them and say, okay, did you intend to play Oblivion Ring or Oblivion Stone? And then let's fix the problem. You're gonna get a game loss.
Yeah. In this case, it is a game loss. This is a mistake that I've made in the past. I declined to give a game loss because I thought that it was obvious and unambiguous, and I was incorrect. So something to keep in mind is that that phrase is very tight, and very few situations are cut and dry.
So let's pretend we exist in a standard right now where Karn's Temporal Sundering does not exist. He sundered it away somehow.
It's banned.
Well,
yes. Well, sure, banned is fine.
Well, that's
If a player just writes Karn on their deck list when they're playing Karn Scion version, is that a legal choice?
strangely, even in a standard where Karn's Temporal Sundering is legal, Karn, if they write Karn on their list, we assume they're talking about Karn Scion version. This falls under that second policy there for legendary or face cards and planeswalkers. And they do have a specific example in the IPG about cards exactly like this. If they write Karn or Jaya or something similar, we assume that they are running the legendary creature or the planeswalker, the character effectively in their deck. Now, if they end up running the other card, well, then that's not right, and that is a decklist problem. Something to keep in mind though is that if there are multiple chases or Chandras or something like that, that is not enough. That is not uniquely identifying, and that is very common nowadays with planeswalker decks because we get a lot of copies of the same planeswalker in the same format, even though one of them is close to unplayable. It still leads to it being very, something to double check on when it comes to that particular policy. So how do we fix this? We remove illegal cards from the list, alter the deck list to match the deck. We assume that the cards that they brought to the table are the ones that they planned on playing with during the tournament, and add basics if necessary. If you remove 4 cards that were illegal in the deck list, allow them to choose what basics they would like to add back in. Mark cards sleeved or unsleeved that are marked or oriented in a way that could give a benefit to that player. Keep in mind that this actually can include someone cross-shuffling their deck. Gotcha. I will move along quickly then. Cross-shuffling. This is most commonly a problem if someone has cross-shuffled after sideboarding. At that point, it is very bad, and often a game loss at that point. Because something to keep in mind for marked cards is that if there is a pattern.
What is cross-shuffling?
Oh, my apologies. Cross-shuffling is when you have a sleeved deck often, or unsleeved, but you shuffle one set of your cards one way and one set of your cards the other, ending up with some sort of mix. Something that you can actually feel by rippling the top of your deck, while drawing or something like that. So with mark cards, something to keep in mind is if there is a pattern, because the baseline of this is a warning. But if there's a pattern, we do upgrade to a game loss because of the transfer advantage. I'm sure you all know by now, but what if someone has a double-faced card and a non-opaque sleeve? It's always marked cards, and it's always upgraded.
The game lost one coverage and an open.
I heard about that on Reddit. No, it's all right. I end up on Reddit sometimes.
No, I know.
But yeah, but that's what it comes down to. If they have marked sleeves, but it's some combination of forest, island, and draft commons, we're probably not going to game loss them because there's no way they could gain an advantage from this. However, we do need to get them to change their sleeves most often, and that's something to work on very quickly. All right, so we're going to move along. We'll go through this. So something to keep in mind if and when you guys are applying to events is the cover letter. So you will always need to have a cover letter. Always, always, always. Even if they tell you that it's optional, write a cover letter. Yeah, they'll see what events you have done on Judgex and your level, so no need to write that. If you'd like to though give a polite here's my name, I'm from this area, that's fine. Tell them your goals, talents, or skills that you feel are unique to you. They'll make you useful. And make it brief, like 100 to 150 words. They read through. I mean, depending on the event, like gosh, I can't imagine how many of you go through for Vegas. But there's so many of these, and they do appreciate it if they are brief and to the point. So references wise, some applications allow you to just put references on there. But if they don't have a place for that, write down some people that you believe would be able to sing your praises on your cover letter, and also make sure to inform them. It's kind of impolite to do otherwise. Oh, question?
As a general rule, and I actually don't know if that was what you just went over, usually ask people before you're going to use them as a reference.
Exactly.
So that way they're not getting like an unexpected, like, hey, this Stephen Brown character, he's done a thing or two before, should we put him on our events? Who the heck is Stephen Brown?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so right on time. Do you guys have any questions for me?
I do, because this actually came up at pre-release. So someone's got Teferi, like new Teferi, and they use his negative, and their opponent, instead of putting the card 3 from the top, puts it in their graveyard. And then they draw that third card and go, wait a minute, this is supposed to be this card. How do you fix that?
Well,
because at that point it's been 3 turns, and that's kind of where my concern was.
Yeah. So at this point, that would fall under one of the partial fixes that we have for game rule violation, which is a card was put in an incorrect area and we need to put it back in the correct area. And at this point, we may have to do some additional fixing because they've looked at another card. In that case, we don't double infract, so we choose the penalty that caused the infraction, which in this case was the game rule violation that didn't put the Teferi 3 from the top, or the Teferi card rather, 3 from the top. And then we have them draw that card and shuffle the other card back.
Okay. So I just erred on the side of caution. I was like, let's just not. Let's just leave it alone.
That's a fair response, but the IPG just give us a tool to deal with that specific situation.
Okay, so even though it's been 3 turns, we can still fix it without doing anything.
Because it fits into one of our allowed partial fixes. Yeah.
Okay.
One more question. I was gonna say that one does also say, and it can be moved with only minor disruption to the current state of the game. So,
which in this case is minor.
Yeah.
if you feel that's the case.
One more question.
Yeah.
No, just
Yeah. One more question.
Going once.
Going twice.
What's your favorite color?
Oh, it's purple.
Okay.
Easy.